Hello guys, this is the video version of my review on the Asus TUF M4, both the wireless and the wired versions. These mice were sent out to me for review by Asus, so I did not pay for them, but all they asked was that I give you guys an honest review of them. Based on the numbers that they gave me, I'm quoting that this guy, the wireless version, is a $70 mouse, and the wired version is a $50 mouse, so I will do my best to assess them as such. So, basics. It is a G Pro wireless type of shape, right? So it is a large ambidextrous mouse. It is long and fairly tall for an ambidextrous mouse, but not particularly wide. The length is 126 millimeters, the height is 40 millimeters, and at the grip width on average is 58 millimeters, with a maximum of 59 towards the top and a minimum of 57 towards the bottom. So that makes it overall slightly larger in every dimension than the regular G Pro wireless. The wireless version is made out of PBT. This is a marketing point for the mouse. For those of you familiar with keyboards, you'll probably know the difference between the ABS plastic that most mice are made out of and PBT. For those of you not as familiar with it, think of it as basically a matte coating, which does a better job of not showing fingerprints and oil, and also which is significantly more durable and resists getting sort of shiny spots or glossy areas due to repetitive wear, the way that a matte-coated ABS plastic mouse will tend to. Beyond that, the wireless version has quite firm and crisp main clicks. They measure about 60 grams force at the front of the scroll wheel, which firmly puts it past what I would call spammable, but it is still a good weighting for FPS players in particular. The thumb buttons protrude noticeably from the shell. They are large for a mouse like this, and they are well placed, so I'm able to hit both of them individually without any issues, and I like them quite a bit. The scroll wheel, similarly, is a decent size, but it doesn't protrude very far. It makes use of this sort of divot or canyon in the middle of the mouse to allow you to put your finger all the way down between the buttons and get a really long scroll if you want it. So this makes it good for navigating web pages and this kind of thing without sticking up too high. Other than that, the steps are clearly defined and there isn't any play or wobble between steps. It uses a Kale scroll encoder. It uses Omron 60 million main clicks and a generic scroll click switch. And the scroll click on this mouse, the scroll wheel is the same on the wired version, by the way, as is the scroll click, is lighter than average, but not so light that you click on accident while scrolling. And due to the fairly well-defined steps of the scroll wheel, you do not scroll on accident while clicking. So overall, very good thumb buttons, very good scroll wheel, and good main clicks if you're the kind of person who likes slightly firmer and more tactile clicks, namely those people who are fond of the type of clicks on a SteelSeries Prime, a Zowie FK, like the FK1C that I tried, those types of mice, you'll find this enjoyable as well. Other than that, the wireless version runs off of either a double or triple A battery. They send you, as part of the box, a double A to triple A, or triple A to double A converter, that clear plastic shell. I put my own AAA lithium battery in here and set up like this as you would actually game with the mouse. The lightest configuration with the lithium AAA and the converter, blah, blah, blah. This is 73 grams, which for an ambidextrous mouse of this size is quite good. For reference, that is 12 grams lighter than a DeathAdder X Hyperspeed, which uses the same battery setup. Other than that, the sensor is slightly interesting, and it takes me longer to describe than it probably should. Asus told me that it is a 3318. Judging by the performance figures, in terms of the maximum acceleration, the maximum DPI, and the maximum tracking speed, it is identical to the 3331 sensor upon which the Viper Mini's sensor is based. Does that make sense? It's kind of a tenuous connection, but suffice to say, you can sort of assess the tracking capabilities and performance of this mouse the way that you would a Viper Mini's. In other words, entirely adequate for serious gaming use, even if it doesn't look as impressive as like a 3370 does on the spec sheet, all right? Now, the main thing people are going to say is, oh, you mentioned the Viper Mini, how about liftoff distance? Okay, well, first of all, you've got a proper PTFE sensor scape, so cool. Second of all, the liftoff distance is fine. It's not super low, but it's basically the same as my Vaxi outset set to the medium, not high, but medium liftoff distance, okay? In other words, if you want to pick holes in this mouse by saying it could have better X, Y, and Z, you can. Again, similarly speaking, the DPI deviation is about 5% below, so it's, when I set it to 800, it measures about 740. Again, not a perfect result, but it takes me about 3 runs of an aim trainer to adjust to this after using a different mouse, and then I never think of it again until I stop using it. It's easy enough to adjust to, and it's not jarring or disconcerting or problematic. So that is, in summary, the wireless version of the mouse. If you like a G Pro wireless shape, perhaps you felt it was a tiny bit too small, and you need a mouse that runs off of AA or AAA batteries, then this is quite a compelling option. Obviously, some people will find aspects of it not to their taste, but overall, I feel that competing against the Orochi V2, which has the same official not on sale price of $70, this mouse comes out as well or better. I prefer the shape and the size. The Orochi is too small for me. But even if you ignore that aspect of it, the main clicks are similar in that they're slightly on the stiffer and more tactile side. The thumb buttons are better. The scroll wheel is equal or better. The sensor performance on both is adequate, although between the two, I found the DPI deviation, which is then combined with the forward sensor position on the Orochi, to be harder to get used to than this mouse is. And between the two, I find the stock skates on the Asus mice to be even better than the stock skates on the Orochi. I've had no complaints about these skates. They remind me, both in the color and the glide, of Tiger Arc 1s, in that they're a hair slower than my core pads on other mice, but they're entirely usable. I don't have real complaints about them. I don't feel the need to replace them at all. So, overall, quite a solid mouse that doesn't have anything which is a mandatory modification that would raise its effective purchase price. So I do think that it competes favorably to the Orochi. And then you add back in the shape component, because this is quite a popular, safe, and well-known shape. And I think this is one of the most interesting and potentially one of the best to recommend mice in this category. So, how about the wired version? Well, the primary difference, other than being made out of ABS plastic, is the weight. This is a 47-gram mouse, and in order to achieve that, obviously you see all of these big cutouts. Now, many people, when they saw the pictures of this mouse, said it looked extremely cheap. And given that it weighs 47 grams, you can make the mistake of thinking that it feels cheap due to how light it is, but actually the shell on this version is even more solid than the wireless version. And it's really not anything to complain about. I mean, it's not a Vaxi mouse, but you also kind of have to remember that the lighter a mouse is, the less aggressively you need to grip it to pick it up or to move it. And so you basically just grip this mouse very gently. And especially when doing that, there is no flex or deformation or any kind of problems that arise with this shell construction. In addition, the giant triangular holes, which people were worried about, to me feel identical to normal honeycomb. They're just as irritating or not irritating, depending on how much you dislike honeycomb, and they don't grab or drag on my skin any more aggressively than a honeycomb mouse does. The main clicks on the wired version are different. Actually, so are the thumb buttons. The main clicks on this mouse are quite light while still being crisp. They are slightly on the stiffer end, but still what I would call spammable at about 45 grams. However, you might be surprised to hear these are Kailh GM4s. It's just that they're mounted further back in the shell, which makes them feel lighter. Similarly, they use a Kailh thumb switch, but it's the type of like flush mount, tiny switch that you find in the G Pro Wireless's thumb buttons. It's like that, but from Kailh. There is some pre-travel on mouse 4 of both these mice. It's slightly noticeable, but it's nothing that really interferes or isn't objectionable to your play. And even with the slightly sloppier wired version, I can't actually push that button back inside the shell at all. So the post-travel limiting on it is very solid, and there's no real issue here. It's not like a PUC first gen, like, oh crap, there goes the switch. It won't do that to you. Yes, it's slightly mushy, but since you're pushing it with the back of your thumb anyway, you're never going to notice. Like, come on. This wired version also, similarly to the difference in the switches, uses a different sensor. It uses a 3335 rather than a 3318 for the wireless. And again, it's another sensor that's associated with some bad characteristics, right? Higher liftoff distance, DPI deviation, this type of thing. Well, the liftoff distance of this wired version is the same as the wireless. So it's the same as a Vaxi mouse set to medium. Additionally, the DPI deviation on this 3335 mouse is significantly better than the wireless version. It's actually well under 2% DPI deviation. It measures about 815 when I set it to 800. And please believe me when I say you will not notice that, okay? It is not a significant difference. And if you see that number show up on a tech power-up review, it will be followed by Pizogel saying that's a good result. Or at least that's what I remember him saying the last time I saw a number anywhere near plus 15 at 800. So the sensor, again, similar to the fact that if you assess this in terms of its capability for gaming, similar to other 3335 mice, the sensor is not a problem here. There's no reason to discount this mouse based off the sensor. Plus, the fact that this guy got a better implementation of the 3335 than almost any other company. Asus has proven before with the ROG Keras that they know how to use this sensor properly. And so I'm really not worried about it here, nor have I found or seen anything that would encourage me to be so. The only sensor-related gremlin here was that I actually had 2 copies of this mouse. The first copy had some type of weird problem with the sensor where if you game with it for half an hour, the sensor would start to cut out, and then at about 40 minutes, 50 minutes, it would stop responding entirely. And then you set it aside for a while and come back later, and it does the same thing. It works fine for half an hour and then starts to die again. Obviously, that's not great, but it's also obviously an extremely noticeable behavior, and since generally speaking people are buying this from Amazon with free returns, I don't think it's really a big problem, not in the sense that I think it's okay for many copies of this mouse to have that issue, but I don't think that many of them will, first of all, because the company wasn't even aware of this being a known issue when I reported it, and secondly, even if it does crop up on a very rare occasion, you just tell them that it's faulty and return it and get a different one. And then, okay, it's inconvenient, yes, but it's certainly not the end of the world. You're not losing money on this mouse. Anyway, I normally try to say stuff like that at the start of the video. I'm sorry that it took this long to remember to mention it, but I did want to inform you guys of that in case I forgot at the start. So other than that, you know, how does this stack up with a HyperX Haste? Because if this is a $50 mouse and it's super light and wired, that's kind of what it competes against. Well, to me, it stacks up favorably. The thumb buttons, again, being small and not protruding very far, are sort of as bad as the Hastes or G Pro Wireless's thumb buttons are, which means they're usable, but I don't like them that much. The main clicks, again, are nice and light and crisp, similar to the Haste. The scroll wheel is good, just like the Haste. In fact, it's probably better than the Haste scroll wheel. The shell construction, adjusted for its weight, you know, how sturdy does it need to be to feel solid? Both of them feel very good. I have no complaints there. This is a better 3335 implementation than the Hastes, right? So there's not really any bones to pick. I mean, unless you're somebody who hates texture on the side of the mouse, then fine, but that's a personal preference thing, not an objective criticism. Plus, it's 12 grams lighter. I mean, if you want to get a lightweight mouse, come on, like, get a lightweight mouse, I guess, right? Anyway, and also, again, it put the shape equation, or the shape component back in. Here's a very safe shape, which is known to adapt well to many different hand sizes and grip styles. So there you go. I mean, certainly this mouse is more comfortable for me to use long-term than the Haste was, because I found it to be too short and too flat, whereas this is significantly longer and significantly taller and has better palm support. So there you go. Do I think these mice are the bargain of the century? No. But against the mice that they compete against, they're priced competitively, their feature set stacks up, they work well for what they're intended to do, and fundamentally they have, again, quite a safe shape that's easy to recommend and is basically a better version of the G Pro wireless shape. So I think that they are mice that fit well into the current market and that they offer something which is valuable. And if you guys are in need of one of these two types of mice, or you're interested in either of them, I do recommend giving them a look. You know, whether you want to wait till they go on sale or not is up to you, but I think they are at least worth considering among the current market offerings, because I think that they are, for many people, going to be a better option than what's already out there.